everyone to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Find them at artistfirst.com. Please send your questions and comments to dj@artistfirst.com. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, EveryMan, and I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And tonight we're going to try our best from the depths of the technological well that we happen to be in at the moment to be conscious.
Right, to be present.
To be present and conscious. And we're going to explore tonight consciousness, which we do, I think, I guess in really every show. We try to explore some aspect of consciousness. But tonight, inspired by a post I saw online, we're going to talk about the timelessness, nature, and in essence the spaceless and in some ways existenceless nature of consciousness, and not only why it's sort of essential, but sort of the pointers, as Eckhart Tolle would say, the signposts that lead us towards this sort of conclusion. And before you sit there and go, what are you talking about? Consciousness has to be within a person. Consciousness has to be within existence. I'll say that consciousness does occur within a person, and it does imbue itself within existence. But the nature of consciousness is what we're going to discuss tonight. But the beginning sort of entryway, the gateway into this conversation is going to be the phrase, point to where your consciousness is. And if you just think about that for a moment, it's sort of almost like a koan. What's the sound of one hand clapping? Point to where your consciousness resides. You can really point anywhere. And because there is no locality to a consciousness, in addition, there's really no space that a consciousness inhabits or takes up. A consciousness has a couple of intriguing characteristics about it. It can't be found. It can't be localized. It doesn't have an address. You say, well, my consciousness is within me. And that's a true statement. It's an absolutely 100% true statement. But where is your me? This is turtles all the way down,
Well, maybe what we should do is start with the definition of consciousness.
If you like to, we can start with the definition of consciousness. I think that's a difficult one.
Well, the accepted definitions of consciousness in the English language.
We can go with that.
All right. 1, a quality or state of being aware, especially of something within oneself. The state or fact of being conscious of an external object, state, or fact. Awareness. Concern for some social or political cause. Mm-hmm. The state of being characterized by sensation, emotion, volition, and thought, or mind. The totality of conscious states of an individual, consciousness, and the upper level of mental life of which the person is aware as contrasted with unconscious processes. So it's different approaches to the word consciousness.
I think all of those are right. I would say they all have, because it's a dictionary, they've all got portions of correctness to them. They're aspects of the word consciousness as a word.
Well, we're just using the beginning of a definition to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. But I like the one that I like of all of those that you mentioned, or at least I'll paraphrase the one that you mentioned, which is that awareness, consciousness as being awareness, and the aspect of it, or rather the feature of it, where awareness is aware, and this is going to sound sort of involuted, it's aware of being aware, or consciousness, conscious of being conscious, or in essence,
aware of being conscious, or conscious of being aware.
Well, yes, but the you could certainly say, and I think no one would argue that animals have a consciousness. They do have a presence. They have a being, state. But the aspect of being aware that one is aware, to be aware of one's own conscious state or one's own consciousness, to have a sense of being, is sort of the hallmark of humanity. You know that you know that you know. If you understand that it sort of gets very involuted. You have the awareness of being aware, and all of these definitions fall short. We all say, well, that's sort of consciousness and sort of not, because they don't. They have the one fatal flaw of definitions, which I've always detested, is that they use the word that they're trying to define within the definition itself. Awareness is nothing more than a synonym for consciousness, and in these definitions, they've even mentioned, consciousness as a definition, or as a word to use in defining being conscious.
Another word is mindfulness.
I like mindfulness better. I like Tolle uses presence. I like presence a lot. But all of these things, and this is the kind of the quality we want to dwell on a bit this evening. All of these things don't have a couple of properties that you associate with reality. They don't have a place, and they don't have a time. So you say, well, everything has a place, everything has a time. My consciousness is where I am. Well, you can say that, but where is it within you? Yes, you can say your consciousness is within your general locality, but your actual consciousness within your physical being cannot be located by any means that we understand today. If you think of yourself as being aware and conscious, you say, yes, all of my perceptions, all of my emotions, all of my thoughts, and now you're getting very close to a wonderful truth. Everything that I am occurs within my consciousness, and Tolle would say, wonderful, you're rushing down the path towards enlightenment, because you've just said that you're not your thoughts, that you're not your emotions, you're not your feelings, you're not your body, you're not all these things. You are all of that is within your consciousness. And then he would even draw you further. He would say, well, where does the universe reside? And you say, well, it's out there. Well, yes, but your perception of it resides within your, and you would wait for a second, your consciousness, your presence. So not only do you, or all of your thoughts and all of your emotions and feelings and everything that you think is you, not only does all that reside within your consciousness, but every other thing in the universe, every other thing that you perceive, every other thing that you call reality resides within your consciousness. It's hard to say. And then you say, point to that. And the consciousness cannot be located. It is a locationless presence. And the interesting thing, if we just dwell for a moment on quantum theory, is when you have something which has no location, it can be said to be of indefinite location. It can be said to be anywhere. The theoretical way to say it is that when you have no locality in the wave function, that it spreads out to infinity. That in essence it is one aspect of you is everywhere. And that aspect of you is your inability, your consciousness's inability to be located.
You sound like an electron.
Well, that's not too far off.
Right. It's almost equating it to the electron cloud that surrounds the nucleus. It can't be defined in a location of space. And I believe you can't measure its charge.
Right. Not at the same time. You can very precisely do one or the other.
Correct.
But not at the exact same time. And so like a quantum phenomenon, your consciousness does not have a location. It just cannot be found. It cannot be measured in any way that we understand. How do you measure a consciousness? You can't find its dimension of any dimension. You can't weigh it. You can't feel it in the sense of touching it physically.
Well, out of the 5 physical senses, you mean?
Right. But there's an interesting sort of corollary here, is that our presences, our consciousnesses, feel each other. You feel the presence of another. So if you say to somebody, well, how can I tell that this cup doesn't have a consciousness? We say, well, you look at it. Well, I can just tell it. It's not conscious. It has a certain presence to it. It's a beautiful cup. I love it. It does all these things. It has this chip and that chip, and it has certain sort of connotations that relate to me because I know the history of this cup. But we know it doesn't have a consciousness. You look at an animal and you say, well, this thing has a presence. It has an energy. It has something that we can sense, and it can sense us. And even in a greater way, you look at somebody with whom you have a relationship, or frankly, a complete stranger, and you can tell that there is a presence there, that there is a consciousness there. So you say to yourself, well, how do you know? How do you know that? And if you go a little deeper, you can honestly answer that you really don't know how you know that something is there when you come into the presence of another consciousness. But you know that there is something there. And for anyone who's had the unfortunate experience of watching a loved one or anyone pass away, when the consciousness leaves the existence, leaves this temporal plane, and it retreats in gradual steps. We could go into that, but there's a whole book written about it, which Margaret knows a lot more about than I do. But when the consciousness withdraws or begins to withdraw, you can sense that. You can sense that somebody is, we use lots of different words, but you could say fading, or just they're withdrawing their presence from the universe. Every other aspect of the person remains virtually the same. Their body looks exactly the same. Their aspect, even in the moment of the presence leaving the flesh, everything else is the same. But there's one thing missing, which you cannot localize. You can't find out where it is or how it went. You can't weigh it, measure it. Everything about the physical person remains exactly the same. But we know that something important has changed. They are no longer there. And when we say they're no longer there, isn't that an interesting thing, Margaret? Because the actual person is there. The actual body is there. Yes, it will, of course, decay and all these other things. But we say they're gone. And they are gone. The person is gone. The consciousness is gone. Where did it go? Right?
Well, consciousness, for me, looking at it this way, if you're talking about the moment of death and the departure of life itself leaving the physical form. Consciousness is the main aspect of the soul, but there is a field of energies that have been woven together through a lifetime with experiences, and all of that goes along with it, not just consciousness. So the departure of life energy from the physical body, that which animates this physical form, is very difficult to describe. Most of the time when this is happening, the people that happen to be in the room are usually in a reaction, because most people have not really witnessed the death of a loved one. And they don't understand what it means to watch the life slip away. If they do, they're usually either in a frozen kind of situation. You go into every stress reaction that there may be, fight or flight or freeze. But I'd like to propose that there is another state of consciousness, and that's witnessing in pure presence. And that is a very difficult state to describe.
Well, I'm glad you caught that, because I am wrong in that respect. I wasn't saying when the life energy leaves the physical, that is what we call death here. But the consciousness oftentimes, and we know this for a fact, and not only just the fact that we know that there's been throughout the ages descriptions of people momentarily being pushed out of their life energy being pushed out of their bodies, and the near-death experiences are all part of that. And we could talk about that a little bit if we wish to, but the aspect of you, the consciousnness, which has woven itself through experience in the temporal and in the physical, although during that whole period of time, however long your life is, you can't localize where that's happening. You can't put your finger or put your instruments or measure any of that. Life experience itself doesn't weigh anything, but it removes itself from this physical form. It uninsouls itself, but it does not cease to exist. It changes back to its eternal form, or rather into its source form, if you will, and retains all of that, all of the experiential, all of the growth, if you will, change, and it's more than just experience, but this is part of it. All of that is retained, brought back.
It is maturity of the soul. It is in process. It is the expansion of awareness.
Right, and that's in essence the goal. That is the reason for why am I here? Okay, that is the answer to that, to the sort of eternal question of, you're here to experience temporal existence and all of its limitations, all of its joys and sorrows, and in essence, development. The place within which you grow the soul towards, the let's say the final form, if you will, is here. And
wait, What do you mean by that?
Well, it just as we say, you come here for the experience of growth. You just mentioned it. I'm merely restating what you said. All of the maturity of the maturation of the soul, all of the experiential, I'm trying to struggle for the word that I'm looking for, but all of what makes your life here in the time that you are here, this ensoulment, the unique ensoulment and the unique embodiment of that eternal spirit goes back with, or we say back, but it is retained and brought back to source. And that's the point of being here in the first place, is to have relationships, to have experiential interactions, to exist within the universe, to be within creation, and to in essence bring life to it. Because without the ensoulment of beings in flesh, in the temporal, you have a universe which is nothing more than a dead clock. It does nothing. Who cares about it? No one does. But yet, bring the spark of life into it, and all else is possible. Free will enters the universe, and all other things that come along with that.
Well, when you have an ensouled being, you have one that is capable of appreciating the universe. Otherwise, it would just run almost like a time clock. Mm-hmm. But humanity is capable of perceiving the interactions that happen down here, the cycles, the processes, the perspective of what it means to have a personal good experience or personal bad experience, and then what is actually good or what is bad, what is truth, because truth actually does exist.
And what is relationship?
Right. It's not, what I'm trying to say is it's not a personal truth. You have your truth and I have mine. No, there does exist an overall truth. And when you put the boundaries of personal in there, you must realize that you are narrowing your awareness down to this small package with a handle on it that you can try to manipulate and make yourself feel better. Because when it doesn't have a handle and it's broad and you can't contain it, it becomes scary. And a lot of people don't want that.
True, but
that's the spaceless and timelessness of consciousness. True consciousness can be very scary.
Yes, I'm trying to integrate that back to so the ensoulment of consciousness here, and all the experience that goes with it, can be, because of the way that consciousness interacts with the temporal, and if you allow those veils, which is the veils of fear, for argument's sake, as you just mentioned, or the veils of ego, or all the other ones, they can get in the way of experience. They can, allow you to wrap yourself up in ego, wrap yourself up in fear, and those sorts of things. All of that is the entrapment, if you will. It's all the barriers that you have to encounter when you are ensouled down here. The being still is the being. The soul is still as vast and infinite as it ever was. The realization, the awareness that you're trying to cultivate, the awareness that you are this being, that you are vast, that you are locationless, which means in essence infinite, that you are timeless, that none of the universe exists outside of your consciousness. It all exists within you. Your consciousness encompasses the whole universe. It encompasses. These are the things that you have to come to. The fear, or the these sort of veils of ego can stand in the way of that. But part of why you're here is to fight your way through, to become aware of being aware, to become in touch with your absolute infinite consciousness, and to understand that, and as we've talked about often, that you aren't who you think you are, and you aren't who you feel you are, and you aren't, any of the roles that the world wants to give you, and you're not your physical. A great example. You're born into this world, and you look very, very different when you leave it. But throughout that whole experience, between the moment of conception to the moment when life leaves this temporal existence, you are you. You don't change. That in and of itself is a huge signpost. It's a huge clue. Why don't you change?
Well, your consciousness doesn't change, but your soul can evolve.
This is a great point. There is a part of you that evolves, the part of you that experiences. The soul grows and matures and acquires knowledge and experience.
Your mind and your choices evolve.
Your emotions evolve. All these things evolve about you, but the being which is you, that which encompasses all of that, is the timeless portion of you. You can't point to the soul, you can't point to the consciousness, you can't point to the being, because it's everywhere, and it's nowhere. And none of those things have a time. Yes, you say, well, the body is born and it dies. It has a time, because temporal things here wear away. As Tolle says, these are all just forms, and forms change. But you, the actual consciousness that is you, and the soul that is you, which acquires experience but still has no locality. It doesn't you don't run out of space in your soul for things, because it's full, or so that part of you, that truly who you really are, the part of you which is always eternal, is also timeless, and it has such tremendous parallels with some of the great science which is going on now. You talk about the spirit and the timelessness of it, and you see, if you're a mathematician, the infinity of the wave function. You say, well, there it is, basically the same thing. You can't look at these two things and say, well, this one's a duck and this one's not a duck. No, they're both the same thing. They could be described in the same way. Similarly, we look at the universe and say, well, it's this many billions of years old, and it's going to be this many trillions of years older. But in fact, we don't know what time is. And the soul and the spirit have no concept of time. There is no part of time which affects them. And so they can be said to be timeless. So you come as a timeless, dimensionless thing which stretches to, which has no boundaries, it's infinite, and you ensoul yourself. And that's the miracle, if you will.
Well, you're interacting with a place, three-dimensional space, and subject to time. So your infinite consciousness is extending a piece of itself into this particular dimension in 3 dimensions in time. And it's a short stint.
Yes, compared to infinity, it's infinitely short.
I think I've described this before when people ask me about this stuff. If you can imagine just a glass top table. And your glass top table is your dimensions in space. 3 dimensions, space, time. And you are standing in front of this table. Now you want to interact with that plane of existence. So what do? You extend a hand out and put your hand on top. That's the extent of what you can do as a three-dimensional being touching a two-dimensional space. You pull your hand away, and what do you have left but a fingerprint or a handprint on it? And if you think about it, that is your two-dimensional interaction. But you are so much more. So much more. So understanding that you're reaching out and experiencing this dimension in full instead of two-dimensional space, because I said three before, but tabletop's two-dimensional space and time. And you're going to interact with three-dimensional space and time. And here you are, in the moment. Here's your body, watching things go by. But you're the equivalent of a handprint in this particular space and time. You know how big you are? You know what your consciousness is? It's fascinating when you think of it, because you have no way of describing that larger existence. If you were the handprint, how do you describe what it means to be part of that larger body that made the print? But that's what you are. Imagine it that way. That means that the print is actually your body in that two-dimensional space. And it can't move.
Well, and I love this analogy, because I've heard you describe it to people before, and it's a good one. It harkens back to to Flatland and those sort of books.
Yeah, Flatland.
But so even if you think of yourself as a body, what Margaret has just described is that your body existing as what looks like sort of a self-contained thing, right? You have your toes and your fingers and everything in between, and also sort of goes along, from work back to home and back and forth and having dinner and whatever. But your consciousness is somehow related to this body, but can't be found anywhere in it. And your consciousness is the vast, infinite you, which is leaving the fingerprint of itself within this body of yours and in this temporal existence. So the touch point, and I think, if not maybe Hindu, but certainly some of the Eastern religions refer to the incarnation as sort of this touch point into the body. It's very, also the analogy that Tolle uses is the sort of, he draws what he calls a cross on the table, on the page rather. He draws a cross. He says the vertical dimension, the vertical line which is crossing the horizontal one, the point at which those two meet is you. And that you is moving along the horizontal plane, which can represent the whole universe. And you look like a point. But it's the vast, Margaret's, the vast being and the fingerprint of the vast being on the glass tabletop, or the point which moves, or the touch point which inhabits you from this vast infinite being, this consciousness, which resides within your form here and has all of these experiences. You can imagine it being just that, just this sort of touching in for a short period of time. Overall, your existence here, maybe it's 50 years or 150, or as little or as much as it may be. Overall, that is basically nothing compared to the infinity of consciousness, of your infinite existence. But it's yet incredibly important, and the only place where infinity comes to have these relationships, to have the experience of limitations, to have the interactions, to have the relationships, to have the place to enlighten, the place to grow, the place to experience. So the universe is vast, of course, but also infinitely small, and everything around it, the consciousness, if you say source, which is all consciousness, the consciousness which is outside or containing the whole universe, of which we are aspects, or what is Tolio always say, emanations of source, comes into the temporal to do exactly that, to have these experiences.
Having the experience allows you to begin the internal, an internal discipline of being able to discern your awareness from different aspects of the experience down here.
Mm-hmm.
You understand when you are being emotional, what that energy feels like. You understand when you're being mental and what that experience feels like.
Mm.
You feel what it means to consider a whole bunch of mental concepts and how those concepts can trap you into thinking only a certain way, or your emotions can also put together constructs that can also funnel, or what's the word I'm looking for? Set up a structure that you could be encaged in, that your only emotional response is this way, because you've always done it this way.
Yeah.
Or we've always done it this way. It's like, no, you're more than that. But understanding that you have the ability to experience this life and what it means to be trapped or suffering, and to develop the internal skills or discipline to begin to take a step outside of it, to touch into the consciousness that is spiritual, divine, which is outside that dimension that has trapped you in that plane of existence, whether it's two-dimensional or three. There are many different dimensional aspects outside of the 2 and 3, of which your consciousness partakes. And beginning to learn how to navigate that, know who you are and what you're feeling, what you're perceiving, what you're sensing, and making your awareness broad enough to make room for all these discoveries, and then begin to look on it with understanding, without grasping. Grasping at what you want to call solidified laws, that it's only going to be this way.
Well, yeah, those are... I wanted to go back because I think you touched on something that we heard a little bit earlier this week, that the point of existence, which is you, and in the moment of now, which is you, has that ability to connect up in the moment of now, to in essence allow in, call it grace or call it connection to source or call it what you will, but the exercise is the two things: is becoming aware of the moment of now, becoming aware that this is the isness of now. This is where you are right now, and you're given the choice, the free will, the yes, if I might remind you of that conversation we heard, the yes to bring in grace into the moment. That's that awareness of who you are, the awareness of the moment of now, and the willingness, the volition to connect up to source in that moment of now is what you're kind of here to learn, and not to be trapped by by what the ego wants to say, what the thoughts want to say, what the emotions want to say, all the cages which are handed you down here, to kind of, with consciousness, understand who you actually are, understand that space and time are just constructs, that you're the timeless infinite, and that in that moment of now there's no time involved. You connect up to grace and you're there. You bring in the infinite into the moment of now and connect up to it. And then what needs to be, which is not necessarily what you like or want or what you think somebody else wants you to do or what you thought you should have been, none of that matters. It's what needs to be. The existence of the moment of now is because you're here in that moment to do the thing that needs to be done. You have to be there and be the being in the moment as yourself, but, and this is the most important point, aware and connected to the infinite. Bringing the infinite into the moment of now is why we're here.
Right. No, because this is a place where consciousness, everything around you wants to put it to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Where you just do what is going on right now. And the only consciousness that they want to interact with is enough so that you can be controlled in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a mental idea or an emotional handle on you, or circumstances have brought you to a certain place and you're a useful body. So they just trying to get groupings together. It's a dream state, because all you're doing is line of least resistance. Whatever's going on, don't make waves. We're going to go do this. And anyone who basically decides they don't want to be part of the nightmare anymore. Because honestly, this is like you're asleep and you're in this nightmare that you feel like you can't wake up from. You're looking at it going, I don't like this. What's this about? This makes no sense.
That's the end of suffering, if you will.
Well, making the decision that you want something else. You don't want to keep doing this. And that's the beginning of it. When you begin to consciously choose where you want to look, and you realize you actually have a real opinion, not just a reaction to what's going on in the moment, but you have a real opinion about it. Something in you, your heart, says, you know what? That's evil. What I'm seeing is evil. You can't do that to another person. Or you look at someone doing something kind, and it just brings a very warm feeling to you and a smile. And you realize that's real. You get to a point where you just want the real. You don't want the fake, the shadows anymore.
Well, and this is the awareness. It's also the acceptance of where you are at the moment of now. The grace that you bring in to say what needs to be here. People say, "Why am I here?" Well, you're here to be where you are in the very moment of now, and your connection back will inform your decision. It doesn't tell you what to do, but the important thing is that you are in awareness, allowing call it grace, call it emanation of source, call it whatever you wish, allowing the infinite to consciously come into the moment of now. So if you go back to the analogy Margaret said, the fingerprint, the shadow, or the form that is in the moment of now connects up consciously to the infinite and allows the infinite to both come into the exact moment of now as well as agency into the moment of now, into the temporal, to do what needs to be done. And it could be exactly what Margaret just said, the act of, righting injustice, the act of a kindness, the act of a real awareness of an actual relationship, of the pushing away of, and these all sound, this is all trite. No, none of it. This is the important stuff. None of it is trite. You're here to do something, and the biblical phrase is, "Your Father in heaven sees all." Yes, it's technically perfectly correct, but what it really means is that when you're connected up in awareness to the infinite is connected to the now, and you don't need to show everybody what you're doing. The infinite is in being, in the moment of now, and in awareness, doing exactly what needs to be done. Nothing else matters, because that's what matters. Your actions aren't driven by ego or thoughts or what I should be doing or what everyone else says I should do. No. What needs to be done when you connect up to the infinite and bring it into the moment of now is obvious and not necessarily easy, but it's like a lock into a key. It turns. You're there turning the exact thing that needs to be done. Why? Because you're there on the spot. You're the one who has this ability. You're in the presence, and you're there in the moment of now. It makes it your unique task. And in fulfilling it, you fulfill the purpose of your being in that moment. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing in your life, just by being there and being connected in awareness. And that's it. There's nothing else more satisfying, but it's really nothing else more wholesome, more right than doing that.
You enter into a very different state
Mm-hmm.
when you are in harmony with the divine consciousness, with God, with the divine heart of God. It is a very, very different state, because your human awareness down here is limited. And when you realize that there is this limitation, you also realize that there are so many things that you're not seeing in the moment. And especially when you're dealing with a problem, whether it be your own or someone else's, someone that is in distress and is suffering, and you want to help. Connecting up to that incredible resource of wisdom and grace and love, being able to see through the eyes of love. I know, speaking for myself, I ask to see through the eyes of love, because as a human being, I don't always look at everybody with the eyes of love. I have a tendency to make a judgment call on them. And that doesn't help anybody, especially me, because then I go into, well, why do I have to deal with that person?
That's a little Margaret, if you will.
Right. So it's like, well, I'm here. Gotta let go of that. All right, Lord, what would you like me to see, and what do I do with it, if anything? And you usually get an answer. If it turns out sometimes the look in the eye of the other person suffering is enough to let you know that all they need is a hug. And so you open your arms. Inevitably what happens, you open your arms and they fall into it. You don't have to move.
Right.
They'll just fall right into you and receive the grace that's there for them. And that's a question that I've been turning over in my own mind. Every door to your discomfort, every door to your suffering, every door to the pain that you see or you feel, do you realize that that's an opening where infinite grace can come out? You can actually help another soul alleviate that pain or alleviate that suffering. And it's not about you. It's like, oh, now I have to open my door and let this infinite grace out. It's like, well, it's not your infinite grace, and frankly, you don't even know what you're doing.
Well, I mean, to formalize what you just said, it's a form of surrender.
Yes.
So, and what are you surrendering? Again, in the moment of now, in awareness, you put your ego aside. You put all the things like you were just saying, the judgment calls and others. So these are all the veils. These are the things which surround and try to cloud your being and your consciousness. So the practice is that in awareness, knowing that you are a timeless being which is vast and infinite, not somebody who has to catch the bus at 4:15. And in the moment of surrendering that, because what you're basically surrendering is that your moment of now in awareness is essential for whatever needs to be done by your being in that moment of now. So you connect up all the time. You connect back up and you say, in this moment of now, connecting up to Source without all the stuff that's piled upon the little ego and all the little Michaels and little Margarets. I don't want to do it. No. It becomes not only obvious, but as Margaret just said, you open yourself to the channel of grace. You say you open your arms, which is just the physical gesture, and the universe falls into it. That which needs to be done in the moment of now, when you allow your consciousness to be aware of the grace, and then to say, because it's all based on, again, you're not forced or driven to any of this. That would not make it any sort of enlightenment, any sort of connection. You consciously, which means with volition, open yourself to the moment of now, and that which needs to be, which might be the simplest of things. You open your arms and you give somebody a hug. As Margaret says, they fall in. I've seen this. They just fall into your embrace, because they, at their level of awareness, whatever it is, understand that this is what they need at that moment.
And
even unconsciously, even desperately unconscious egos will accept that because it's so right. It crashes through all the desperately unconscious egos, and it touches the actual being, which is beset by all these demons, these figurative demons of ego and every other blessed thing that's hung off of them that you can see. And you make that connection because it needed to be. And some portion of that burden is relieved, is erased, is healed.
They come out of their prison for an instant.
For an instant, yeah.
And the freedom that is there, the spaciousness. Because when you open your arms, you are creating a safe space for them. There's no judgment there. It's just here, in this moment. Arms open. Are you ready to receive? And you don't initiate, grabbing the person and forcing them into a hug. You stand there and let them decide, because they cannot receive grace unless they decide to receive it. And inevitably, that spaciousness is like, I've been looking for this.
It creates that being echoing within them.
Your presence there is solid. It's truth. There is a ring to it. And people respond to the truth of that moment. You're present. And you're not going anywhere. You don't scare them. There's no reaction. See, that's the difference. Isn't that interesting? People know when you're having a reaction.
Yeah, because they can, again, the presence senses all.
Right.
And it's only the veils.
So the person senses your consciousness in that moment, and not a reaction. And that allows them to go, looking for this.
And to we could dwell on it for a second, but just for a very instant, the reason that it appeals, that it's so incredibly strong, is that it echoes in the infinite, in their infinite consciousness,
right,
in their non-localized awareness. That's where you're touching them.
Right.
We didn't even get to our quote, which was a lovely one from Deepak Chopra, which we should probably end the whole thing with here. But in point, we'll say the quote, but the point is that when you connect up to the eternal, the one who is next to you, who is more beset and burdened and trammeled by all the cares that they imagine the world has about them, connects at the same level. And that spaciousness of consciousness, as Margaret says, gives them an instant of relief, and they're almost impossibly attracted to it.
Right.
Do you want to do Deepak?
Okay.
Because this is what it's all been about. Deepak had it summed up, and we just ignored him the whole hour.
Space and time are sensed, not seen. They are created in consciousness, which is spaceless and timeless. Chopra.
Right. And now our time is done.
And I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
And thank you for being with us.